The Appalachian Mountains have always hidden more than forests and forgotten trails. Beneath their ridges lies one of the largest underground cave systems in North America, a maze of limestone tunnels carved by water over millions of years. Most of those passages have been carefully mapped by experienced cavers. Others remain untouched, too dangerous or too remote for anyone willing to risk exploring them. In October of 2024, 4 experienced cave explorers set out to investigate one of those forgotten places. Their destination wasn't marked on any tourist map. It was an isolated sinkhole nearly 6 miles from the nearest road, surrounded by dense hardwood forest where even GPS signals struggled to stay connected. The only reason they knew it existed was because of a weathered geological survey from 1978. Buried deep within the report was a handwritten note from an unnamed surveyor. Possible secondary passage discovered. Exploration discontinued after unstable conditions. Tunnel not added to official map. Most people would have dismissed it as a mistake. They didn't. The team consisted of Ethan, a 34-year-old cave survey specialist with over a decade of exploration experience. Rachel, a geologist who had spent years studying underground rock formations. Noah, an experienced rescue caver known for remaining calm in dangerous situations. And Mason, the youngest member of the group, whose helmet camera documented every expedition from beginning to end. They had prepared for weeks. Fresh batteries, backup lights, 3 separate navigation systems, enough supplies to survive underground for 2 days. Everything about the expedition had been carefully planned. At sunrise, they left the forest trail behind and followed the old survey coordinates. Thick fog drifted between the trees as the ground slowly sloped downward. After nearly 3 hours of hiking through untouched wilderness, Ethan stopped without saying a word. Hidden beneath layers of moss and fallen leaves was a narrow opening in the earth. Cold air poured from the darkness below. Rachel knelt beside the entrance and aimed her flashlight inside. The beam disappeared into blackness long before it reached the bottom. No footprints, no climbing rope, no signs that anyone had entered recently. Only silence. Ethan smiled, clipped his descender onto the anchor rope, and looked back at the others. "If this tunnel really isn't on the maps," he said quietly, "we may be the first people to see what's down there in nearly 50 years. None of them noticed the small pile of fresh mud beside the entrance. It carried the unmistakable impression of a modern hiking boot. Someone had already been there. The entrance shaft measured just over 40 feet deep. From the surface, it looked like any ordinary vertical drop, narrow, damp, and carved naturally into the limestone. Ethan volunteered to descend first, performing one final equipment check before clipping his descender onto the static rope. "Rope is secure," he called up. "I'll radio once I hit the bottom." He leaned backward, trusting only the rope supporting his weight, and slowly disappeared into the darkness. Within seconds, daylight vanished. The temperature dropped sharply. Moisture coated the cave walls, making them shimmer beneath the beam of his headlamp. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop echoing through the shaft with surprising intensity. The deeper he descended, the quieter the outside world became. No birds, no wind, only the rhythmic squeak of climbing gear and the distant sound of falling water. "Bottom reached," Ethan's voice crackled through the radio a minute later. "Floor stable, you can come down." One by one, the others followed. Rachel arrived next, immediately studying the surrounding rock with the curiosity of a geologist. "These formations are strange," she murmured, running a gloved hand across the limestone wall. "Look at the mineral layers. They don't match the surface geology." Noah swept his flashlight across the chamber, checking every corner as he always did before moving forward. "Nothing obvious," he said. "No recent collapse. Air feels good." Finally, Mason landed beside them, adjusting the helmet camera mounted above his forehead. "Camera rolling," he said with a grin. "Let's see if we actually found the lost tunnel." The chamber itself wasn't particularly remarkable. roughly 30 feet across, with several narrow passages branching away into darkness. Ethan unfolded the official cave survey and compared it to the compass readings. Everything matched, at least for now. The team selected the eastern passage, the one the old report suggested would eventually connect to the unexplored section. As they walked deeper, small reflective trail markers were attached to the walls every 20 feet. It was standard procedure. If their navigation systems failed, the markers would guide them back to the entrance. After nearly 40 minutes underground, Ethan stopped. This should be it. Everyone gathered around. According to the official map, the tunnel ended here. Directly in front of them stood a solid limestone wall. No opening, no passage, nothing. Ethan frowned. This doesn't make any sense. Rachel slowly raised her flashlight toward the ceiling. Wait! Half hidden behind centuries of mineral deposits was a narrow crack, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Fresh air. The kind that could only come from a much larger space beyond. Ethan stepped closer and brushed loose dust away with his glove. Someone had already done the same thing. The rock around the crack wasn't covered in centuries of undisturbed sediment anymore. It had been scraped clean, recently. Without saying a word, the four explorers stared into the impossible opening. Someone had found it before them, and whatever lay beyond had never been added to a single official map. The opening was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Ethan volunteered to go first, carefully turning sideways as he slipped between the jagged limestone walls. One by one, the others followed, their backpacks scraping against the rock. The passage was so tight that every breath echoed inside their helmets. After nearly 30 feet, the tunnel suddenly widened. The beam from Ethan's headlamp revealed a massive chamber stretching far beyond the reach of the light. Thick stalactites hung from the ceiling like frozen teeth, while the ground was covered in untouched mud that looked as if no human had stepped there in decades. Then Noah froze. Guys, don't move. Everyone pointed their lights toward the ground. There, pressed clearly into the wet mud, was a single boot print. Modern, deep, fresh. Ethan knelt beside it, comparing the tread pattern with his own boots. It isn't ours. Rachel slowly swept her flashlight around the chamber, expecting to see more tracks. There weren't any, just one footprint leading into the darkness, none coming back. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Someone had entered this hidden chamber before them, but according to the evidence, they had never left. Ethan stood silently, staring into the black tunnel ahead. Then, somewhere deep inside the cave, a single rock clattered across the floor. For several seconds, no one spoke. The sound had come from somewhere ahead, sharp, deliberate, like a loose stone striking solid rock. Ethan raised a hand, signaling everyone to stay quiet. The cave fell completely silent. Then, knock. A single echo drifted through the darkness. A few seconds later, knock, knock. Rachel frowned. Could that be water? She whispered. Noah slowly shook his head. No, water doesn't sound like that. The team advanced cautiously, their footsteps slow and measured. Every few yards, Ethan placed another reflective marker on the wall. It was routine, but somehow it made everyone feel a little safer. After another minute, Mason stopped walking. Hold on. He turned off his headlamp. The others did the same. The cave was swallowed by absolute darkness. Then they heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was louder, closer, almost as if something deeper in the cave was responding to their presence. Noah switched his light back on. That's enough, he said quietly. We're not alone down here. Ethan didn't answer. His flashlight had settled on something half buried in the mud. It was an old metal climbing piton, rusted with age. Attached to it was a faded strip of orange survey tape. Rachel picked it up carefully. Printed across the tape, barely visible beneath years of dirt, were 4 words: Appalachian Survey Team, 1978. The same expedition that had never returned to map this section of the cave. No one spoke during the hike back to the surface. The strange knocking had stopped, but the silence felt even worse. The team packed their equipment and agreed on one thing: they wouldn't be going back into that cave. Hours later, after returning to their campsite, Mason connected his helmet camera to a laptop. Everyone gathered around, hoping the footage would explain the sounds they had heard underground. At first, everything looked normal: the descent, the hidden passage, the lone boot print. Then the video reached the moment they discovered the survey tape. As the camera panned across the chamber, Ethan suddenly paused the footage. "There," he whispered. In the far corner of the screen, barely visible beyond the beam of their headlamps, a second light flickered for less than 2 seconds. It wasn't one of theirs. The angle was impossible. It appeared to be much deeper inside the cave, moving slowly behind a wall of rock where no mapped passage. The timestamp confirms something even stranger. At that exact moment, all 4 explorers were standing together. No one could identify the source of that light. The team never returned to the cave. Months later, state survey crews searched the area using the original coordinates. They found the entrance shaft, but the narrow crack leading to the hidden chamber was gone, as if it had never existed at all. In the summer of 2023, 29-year-old Daniel Mercer had one goal: to explore a cave few people had ever entered. Located deep within a remote mountain range, the cave was known only to experienced cavers because of its narrow entrances and unpredictable tunnels. Daniel wasn't reckless. He had explored caves for nearly 8 years, carried professional equipment, and always informed someone of his route before entering. This trip was supposed to be another routine solo expedition, lasting no more than 4 hours. By 9:15 that morning, he had descended nearly 300 feet below the surface. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no birds, just the constant drip of water echoing through endless stone corridors. Daniel stopped to photograph an unusual rock formation when he heard something that made him lower his camera. A voice. Faint, almost impossible to hear. "Daniel." He turned off his camera and listened. Silence. He checked his radio, thinking another explorer might be nearby, but every channel was dead. He called out, "Hello? Is someone down here?" Only his own voice echoed back. Daniel laughed nervously, convincing himself it was just the cave playing tricks on his ears. Then, only seconds later, the voice returned. This time it was clearer and much closer. "Daniel, come here." Daniel stayed perfectly still, waiting for the voice to come again. Nothing. The cave was silent, except for the steady drip of water somewhere in the distance. He checked his watch and marked his location on the cave map. According to the survey, there was only one passage ahead. He took a deep breath and continued walking, telling himself the voice had been nothing more than an echo. After another 10 minutes, he reached a fork in the tunnel. Daniel frowned. There shouldn't be 2 passages. He unfolded the map again, comparing it to the cave walls. The survey clearly showed a single corridor, yet 2 tunnels stretched into the darkness before him. One looked familiar, while the other was narrower, colder, and carried a faint draft. Curious, he pointed his flashlight into the narrow tunnel. The beam caught something white lying on the ground. A climbing helmet. It was covered in dust, but the headlamp attached to it looked surprisingly modern. Inside the helmet, written in black marker, was a single name: Daniel. His heart skipped. It was his own name. Not similar, not close, exactly the same. Before he could process what he was holding, the voice echoed through the tunnel again. Soft, calm, only a few feet away. "Ah, you're almost here." Daniel dropped the helmet and quickly backed away from the narrow tunnel. His breathing became shallow, as he stared into the darkness, expecting someone to step into the light. No one did. Trying to stay calm, he switched on his body camera and began recording everything around him. "If anyone finds this," he said quietly, "there's someone else down here." He turned and started walking back the way he had come. After several minutes, something felt wrong. The reflective trail marker he had attached to the wall was gone. He checked the map. He should have reached the main chamber by now. Instead, he was standing in a tunnel he had never seen before. The walls were tighter. The air was colder. His compass spun slowly in circles before stopping completely. Then, crunch. A small rock cracked behind him. Daniel froze. He slowly turned his flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Just an empty tunnel, disappearing into darkness. He took another step. Crunch. This time the sound matched his movement. He stopped. A second later, another footstep echoed behind him. Not an echo, a real footstep, perfectly matching his pace. Someone, or something, was walking just beyond the reach of his flashlight. Daniel tightened his grip on the camera and whispered, "I'm not alone." Then, his headlamp flickered, and the cave went completely dark. Daniel ran without looking back. The narrow tunnels echoed with his footsteps as he pushed deeper into the maze, desperately searching for the route that had brought him in. His breathing was ragged, and every few seconds he glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see someone chasing him. No one was there. After nearly 20 exhausting minutes, a faint glow appeared ahead. Daylight. Daniel climbed out of the cave shaking, covered in mud, and drove straight to the nearest ranger station. He reported everything: the strange voice, the hidden chamber, and the man standing in the darkness. A search team entered the cave the following morning. They found the chamber. They found the chair. They even found the old backpack. But there was no sign of another person. Convinced stress had caused Daniel to imagine the encounter, the Rangers reviewed the footage from his body camera. For most of the recording, everything matched Daniel's story. Then they reached the final 30 seconds. As Daniel sprinted through the tunnel, the camera briefly turned toward the chamber one last time. Standing beside the wooden chair was the same silent figure, perfectly still, watching him leave. The investigators zoomed in, hoping to identify the man's face. Instead, they noticed something far more disturbing. The helmet wasn't old at all. It was the exact same model Daniel had been wearing that day. The case was never explained, and Daniel never entered another cave again. Most abandoned mines are sealed for a reason. Some are unstable. Others contain toxic air or flooded tunnels. But in the mountains of West Virginia, there's an abandoned coal mine that locals avoid for a different reason. For nearly 60 years, stories have circulated about strange lights deep underground and the sound of mining picks echoing long after the mine closed. In the fall of 2025, 3 friends, Tyler, Ben, and Lucas, decided to investigate. All 3 had experience exploring abandoned places and documenting forgotten locations for their YouTube channel. They weren't looking for ghosts. Their goal was simple: record the inside of a mine that had been abandoned since the early 1960s. The entrance was hidden behind thick brush, partially collapsed but still large enough to crawl through. Rusted warning signs hung crooked on the rock wall. Danger, mine closed, keep out. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of damp earth and old timber. Wooden support beams creaked softly with every gust of wind drifting through the tunnels. About 20 minutes into the exploration, Lucas stopped recording. "Do you guys hear that?" The 3 of them stood perfectly still. From somewhere deep inside the mine, clang, a metal pickaxe struck solid rock. The sound echoed once, then again, slow, steady, like someone was still working at the end of the tunnel. The metallic banging continued every few seconds. Clang, clang. It was too steady to be falling debris. Tyler checked the map on his phone. According to the old mining records, every tunnel beyond this point had been sealed after the mine shut down in 1962. So, who's making that noise? Ben asked. No one answered. The three followed the sound deeper into the mine. Their headlamps barely cut through the thick darkness, revealing rusted rail tracks disappearing into the distance. Then, Lucas spotted something. A yellow miner's helmet rested on the tracks. It looked decades old, covered in coal dust and spider webs. Tyler picked it up. Inside was a faded name tag, Henry Collins. Ben immediately recognized it. Wasn't he one of the miners who disappeared here? Tyler nodded. According to local records, Henry Collins had vanished during the mine's final week of operation. His body was never recovered. Before anyone could say another word, clang. The sound echoed again. This time, it came from directly ahead. Tyler slowly raised his flashlight. At the end of the tunnel, nearly 100 feet away, a small light flickered once, like an old mining lantern. Then it disappeared. The three friends looked at each other. Someone was still down there. The lantern was gone. Tyler rubbed his eyes, convinced he had imagined it. But Ben and Lucas had seen it too. Without saying a word, they followed the old rail tracks until they reached a massive steel gate built into the rock. A thick chain wrapped around the bars. The padlock was rusted shut. A faded warning sign read, "Authorized personnel only." Beyond the gate, the tunnel disappeared into darkness. Lucas raised his camera and zoomed in. Something caught the light. Fresh boot prints. Not old mining boots, modern hiking boots. Tyler's stomach tightened. That can't be right. There was no way anyone could have entered through the locked gate. As they stood there, the metallic sound returned. Clang. Only this time, it came from the other side of the gate. Then another sound followed. Slow footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone was walking toward them. The three friends backed away, their headlamps fixed on the tunnel. The footsteps stopped just beyond the darkness. No face appeared, no voice, only silence. Then, without warning, the heavy steel gate rattled violently. The chain shook. The padlock slammed against the bars, as if someone on the other side had grabbed it and was trying to get out. The gate slammed again. This time, the chain snapped. The sharp crack echoed through the mine like a gunshot. "Run!" Tyler shouted. The three friends turned and sprinted down the tunnel, their boots pounding across the old rail tracks. Behind them came the sound of heavy footsteps. Slow, deliberate, never speeding up, yet somehow getting closer. Lucas glanced over his shoulder. "I can't see anyone." Ben didn't look back. "Just keep moving." Suddenly, the ground beneath Ben gave way. The rotten wooden floor collapsed, sending him crashing into a narrow shaft nearly 15 feet below. His flashlight disappeared into the darkness. "Ben!" Tyler yelled, dropping to the edge. He pointed his headlamp into the hole. Ben was alive, but frozen in place. He wasn't looking at Tyler. He was staring into the darkness behind him. His face had gone completely pale. "Don't," Ben whispered. "Don't shine your light over here." For one terrifying second, no one moved. Then Lucas instinctively aimed his flashlight past Ben. The beam revealed an old mining tunnel that wasn't on any map. At the far end, someone stood perfectly still, wearing a coal miner's helmet, holding an old lantern. The light suddenly went out, and Ben screamed. Tyler and Lucas managed to pull Ben out of the collapsed shaft, but he never stopped looking over his shoulder. He refused to explain what he had seen. The three friends abandoned their equipment and ran until they finally reached the mine entrance. None of them spoke during the drive home. A week later, Tyler uploaded only a few minutes of footage from the trip. The rest had been deleted. Not by him. The files were simply gone. Curious about the hidden tunnel, local authorities later sent a small inspection drone into the collapsed shaft where Ben had fallen. The drone traveled nearly 300 feet before its signal began to fail. Just before the connection was lost, its camera captured one final image. An old mining chamber, a rusted lantern, dozens of mining helmets neatly lined against the wall. And standing in the center, a man wearing a coal miner's uniform. His face was impossible to see, but he wasn't looking at the drone. When investigators returned with better equipment, the hidden tunnel was gone. Solid rock sealed the entire passage. To this day, no one has explained where the drone traveled or who was waiting in the darkness.